Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. I hope you enjoy. We Can Do It Cheaper, written by Initial Macaron 4340. The galaxy was home to a myriad of species of diverse talents. The Crid, descendants of apex predators that once stalked their primordial Deathworld, were consummate warriors, and their preferred mercenaries of discerning despots and warlords. The Metics, with synthetic minds that dreamt in ones and zeros, were designers and fabricators of the most powerful computers and programmers in the entire galaxy. The Slen, charismatic shapeshifters native to the only Class Zero garden worlds in existence, monopolized the pleasure industries. The Nerek, a race based entirely on off-world habitat ships, maintained the most reliable starlines and shipping agencies that ever plied the interstellar highways. The Teleron, a race of reptilians with an evolutionary inability to make contextual value judgments and who viewed operational redundancy as an art form, understandably became the pillar that held up the galactic bureaucracy. An immediate consequence of this elaborate network of specialized roles was that it was practically impossible for nascent members of the galactic community to become a major economic or political presence. For every young race with an affinity for a particular field, there existed an older one that completely dominated it. But there was one exception to the rule, an outlier case. On an unremarkable G-type main sequence star on the western spiral of the galaxy, there existed a particularly remarkable young race of bipedal primates. The humans, as the primates call themselves, were remarkable because they went down a path no other race did before them. Rather than attempting to progressively become better at a certain field, they invested time and money into every possible industry they could get their hands on, an act of complete insanity. No entity, let alone an ascent race, could hope to excel in any one area if their attention and resources were spread over so many fields all at once. But the humans did, and they were even familiar enough with their strange tactic that they even had a name for it: portfolio diversification. The craziest part of it is that it all worked out, and all because of a single magic statement. A promise whispered into the auditory organs of all willing listeners. We can do it cheaper. Meta computers could do practically everything from something as simple arithmetic to something as impossible as determining the exact position and momentum of a subatomic particle at the same time. Of course, quality does not come cheap, and an entry-level metric system on average was priced the same as a small moon. But a common trait amongst governments everywhere, that fiscal amputations in certain non-essential areas, such as education and healthcare. And that was where the humans came in. Sure, their computers had slower processors, less efficient heatsinks, and lesser amounts of memory than their average. But they were cheap, and they never required maintenance because they ran on Linux. And even if they did, chances are there was an archive thread somewhere in an ancient corner of the human internet that taught you how to fix the precise problem that plagued your system. Soon, human computers graced hospitals and university offices and high school computer labs across the galaxy, bringing up crucial public funding to be injected into more serious matters such as the military or the politician's wallet. The humans had a name for this tactic too. Unsurprisingly, they called it niche marketing, which is to target a small section of consumers rather than whole markets. The Slen devoted an entire culture in the pursuit of the highest forms of art and pleasure. Entire paradise worlds were dedicated to a single art, or titillating a single sense. On Vapor Prime, thespians of the highest caliber crafted grand, sweeping tragedies that lasted months in performance. On Ramza 3, master gastronomists served exclusive clientele with culinary creations that were each a unique masterpiece in of themselves. On Baron 2, musical prodigies created orchestral compositions that ever pushed towards harmonic perfection. The Slen did not create and perform their art for everyone. Their clientele had to have a refinement and appreciation of high culture, but most of all, good taste. The humans were never invited. Not that they cared much, of course. The goal of the human entertainment industry was not to search for artistic perfection. No, They didn't even believe in artistic perfection. Their culture even had a whole thing going about this, resulting in them existing in what they call the state of post-modernity. No, the goal of their entertainment industry is to be as widely consumed as possible, which they did by inserting something that appealed to as many consumer demographics as possible. They called this the lowest common denominator, which could really mean anything: insipid romance in a hollow film about war, gratuitous violence in a hollow film about love, the same pentatonic notes over the same three-chord natural major progression arranged differently enough to pass as different songs, or even unhealthy amounts of sodium and lipids in packaged foods. Of course, the lowest of the lowest common denominators was value for money. Everybody loved cheap things, and the humans obliged. The thinking was, why face a king when a whole galaxy of peasants threw their coins at your feet? This was why, when the time of human holofilm industry released Vindicators 26, End War Reloaded, Final Finale, Director's Cut, there was a larger number of Kentucky Fried local avian analog that occupies poultry ecological niche outlets across the galaxy than there were mentions of the term meta-narrative in the derogatory context in scholarly critiques of Slen art theory written by angry human artists. The humans applied the same principles of niche marketing and the lowest common denominator to the transportation industry. The Nerect ships were faster and more reliable than their human counterparts, and their starliners contained luxuries, comfortable interiors, and an award-winning service staff, contrasting with more functional flying metal and duct tape boxes that the humans employed. An easy choice for the financially responsible company. No employee would suffer the temptations of comfort or luxury when they could do just fine huddled up on the folding chair next to a crew of loud, aggressive apes. An easy choice also for fiscally astute governors across the galaxy. They could waste precious public funding in maintaining a well-oiled logistics system, or they could hand off contracts to the humans for minimal fee and non-minimal risk of asset loss. Humanity's transport industry soon dominated the niche of the all-expenses-paid business trips and bureaucratic supply chains. And of course, the low prices of their service meant that they were also the first choice for the burgeoning class of blue-collar workers, pre-FTL species, and undergrad students with wanderlust as their social media bios. When the humans were done with the portfolio diversification, they were the fastest-growing economic power amongst the younger civilizations. Their presence in any and one industry was minimal, dwarfed by the specialists. But overall, they turned the most annual profit in their class. They chose not to celebrate this landmark, though, and secretly expanded under the radar for decades. But by the end of the first century of their galactic presence, they were too big and prosperous to hide. The Tellarons finally took real notice of them. They saw humanity for what it was, an existential threat that could possibly topple galactic society on its head. They had to do something. Awakening long-dormant organizations of intelligence and subterfuge, they set out to cripple the humans. Promises were bestowed on allies and trade partners. Lesser races were threatened. Propaganda was disseminated. What a costly blunder they committed. The Tellarron were old and wise. They were present at the founding of the Union of Spacefaring Civilizations. They had seeded countless worlds, many of which were now life-bearing. They had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. But they persevered. They persevered because, unlike their rivals, they did not bank on brute might. Their strength was subtle, diplomatic. The right threat here, the right promise there, and the galaxy opened up for their taking. There were kings without the crowns that drew death to their wearers, but for all their wisdom, they never considered the possibility that the others could do what they did, but better. In their self-assured negligence, humanity had stolen soft power from under their noses. Not much had changed in the last 100 years. The Krids were still the strongest military power. The Metic still dominated the tech industry. The Slen still dictated good taste, and the Nerek still owned the galactic trade corridor. Except there was one key difference. The humans were everywhere. Due to their diverse industries, there was no system that didn't have at least a few of them, and due to their booming entertainment sector, there was no system that didn't know their culture. Humans became the one thing every species was familiar with. The Co on the Sindel system could explore for the first time the alien tunnel streets of Bandoko at the other end of the galaxy, and still recognize the Chinese restaurant on the main tunnel street for what it was. A reptilian Ilitech might have nothing in common with the giant floating cephalopod that inhabited the gas giant of Sargosa 4, except both have most likely watched Vindicators 92, Rebirth Origins, the soft reboot, and shared strong opinions on it. This ubiquitousness of the humans gave them the opportunity to bombard the entire galaxy with whatever messaging, overt or subliminal, that they wanted. This was an opportunity they seized ceaselessly. Human holofilms and hologames which saturated the market pushed narratives that positioned the humans as powerful, benevolent, and forever relevant. The effects of this were subtle at first. Bipedal species began dressing like humans. Juveniles of most species started adopting human vernacular while conversing in galactic common. In the next few decades, almost every culture hybridized to varying extents of human culture. Food, clothes, art, all reflected human influence. Everybody wanted to look like them, eat like them, live like them. By the end of the century, human opinion was universally taken to be the relevant opinion, if not necessarily always the correct one. Good opinions were formed in discourse with human ones and validated by human ones. The consequence of these circumstances was that when the Terran started acting up against the humans, they were shocked to learn that in only a century the galaxy had forgotten that they held the true seat of power. The humans were at fault for this amnesia. They had seized the narrative and had constructed a hyper-real image of the Terran as lazy, incompetent bureaucrats, and this image had consumed the past. Reality itself was but an image for the politicking Terran. They were always what the narrative portrayed them to be. Now, they were irrelevant remnants of a dead past. They may have been masters of diplomacy in their time, but the humans had created and monopolized the galaxy's first culture industry. With the fall of Terran, the humans in all but name took their place in the galactic ecosystem. The Crid, ancient rivals of the Terran, did not see it that way. Their hated enemy was gone, and so was the delicate balance that they so zealously preserved. Krybal would taste Xenos blood again. The Crid armies were the victors of 1,000 wars and had crushed 1,000 worlds under their boots. Every sane faction in the galaxy recognized their military superiority, and world after world surrendered to minimize unnecessary bloodshed. The humans were not the same. To them, what the Crid had was not strength, but branding. The biggest advantage they had was that everybody else thought they had the advantage, and branding wasn't a threat. It was an opportunity. If they bested the Crid, they would essentially monopolize the conflict industry. No different than an economic or diplomatic takeover. When the humans refused to kneel, the Crid declared war. It seemed like all was lost for the young civilization that almost won it all. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and outclassed by the ancient race bred solely for war. But humanity was undaunted. They had been in a position before. In fact, they had been in this position so many times that they had a name for it: asymmetrical warfare. To say the humans had odds against them would be to show fundamental ignorance of the species. They were faced with a superior foe, yes, but a foe they knew. Years of fighting at their side gave the humans insight into the Crid. They were the most powerful, the most deadliest, yes. But they had always been, and it showed in how they fought. Powerful on the offensive, but no contingencies for the unforeseen. A weakness to be exploited. So when the Crid fleet launched a massive blitzkrieg, headed straight for the Sol system, they were met with little resistance, until they were deep in enemy territory when their supply lines were cut. Packs of cloaked stealth destroyers attacking only when the odds were in their favor, and always avoiding ships that could properly counter their attacks. Attrition set in, and the fleet was picked off one by one. The next Crid offensive was more wary, more strategic. A slow, uniform push, followed by a pincer movement that cut off the humans this time. The fleet spread out over 7 systems, caught behind enemy lines. The ships were lost to superior Crid firepower, but the worlds they left unprotected were another matter. The Crid attempted to seize them via ground troops, presuming that their superior firepower would crush native population into submission. They were wrong. Civilians organized themselves into partisan militia, bolstering the ranks of the regular military, and then they all disappeared into jungles, mountains, deserts, and all manners of difficult terrain. From there they launched sneak attack after sneak attack that completely negated chances for a stable Crid presence on the surface. Attempts to flush out the guerrillas were ill-fated, as Crid troops fell to traps, sickness, local fauna, and even more ambushes. Casualties rose so high that the Crid command ordered their fleets to glass human worlds rather than to seize them. This was a disastrous mistake on their part. 5 months after the first human world was glassed, 50 human ships decloaked in 7 Crid systems near the front line. All of the ships carried only a single high-yield orbital bombardment device with no shields, weapons, or point defense devices, making it easier to infiltrate Crid lines. The Crid lost 15 worlds for 15 lost human ones. All 50 of the human ships were lost to enemy fire along with their crew. 2 months after that, 50 more human ships showed up over 19 Crid core worlds, this time disguised as Narek freighters. Or rather, they were actual Narek freighters the humans stole and retrofitted with fusion reactors that doubled up as high-yield WMDs. All 19 Crid worlds were lost. The humans achieved decisive victory the following year. One could argue that it was the suicide attacks that did it, or the guerrilla warfare, but a much-neglected factor in the victory was the very same magic statement that facilitated the rise to economic dominance. We can do it cheaper. They knew from the get-go that it needed to be a war of attrition for them to have a chance, and they prepared accordingly. All of their ships were outclassed for a reason. Bigger, more advanced ships were costlier to build and maintain. Small destroyers with minimal shielding and a single spinal cannon. Each shipyard could build 5 of those a month. The same philosophy informed their ground troops. They had no energy-based small arms, relying on ballistic weapons, even when they had the technology to upgrade. Energy weapons were costlier to make and required more maintenance. They had no personal energy shields. Everything was traditional ceramic and graphene. Cheaper and easy to replace. Of course, all this cost-cutting meant tactical disadvantage, but they made up for it with logistics. In the long run, the resources they conserved allowed them to outlast the Crids. End of story. I would quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and Patreons. Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Lord Azrakal, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Dragzoon WRE, Holly's Sister, Arcadian. Thank you very much.